The images still disturb. More than a month later, children seeming to suffer from a chemical attack, likely chlorine gas and sarin, according to doctors. The attack on Douma, attributed to the Syrian regime, reportedly killed 70 people and injured 500. And it seemed to be a breaking point for the rebels who had long defended this stronghold. The very next day, they agreed to surrender the area. Since then, we've seen little beyond desolate scenes of the aftermath. Tonight, though, you're going to see so much more. As the regime takes over and roots out the remnants of opposition, the CBC's Margaret Evans got rare access to Douma. What she found there gives the clearest picture yet of how the rebels persisted and what they now face in defeat.
There is a dreamlike quality to Douma that's hard to shake. Imagery so surreal that you struggle to sweep the cobwebs from your mind. After withstanding years of siege, the rebel-held city fell to the Syrian army last month after a ferocious bombing campaign, including an alleged chemical weapons attack. Damascus insists it never happened, that the rebels staged it. About 50,000 people are still here, little shoots of life springing up against the odds in the midst of all the destruction. The only bicycle repair shop in town doing a thriving business. I'm not leaving, says Mohammed, a father of 5. He heard reports of a chemical attack, he says, but smelled nothing himself. People are friendly, but entry to and from Douma is strictly controlled by Russian soldiers. They negotiated the surrender and exit of holdout rebels, mainly from the Army of Islam. A few journalists have been allowed to visit, not so much to see what's up top, but what lies beneath. A vast network of tunnels rebel fighters are said to have created under the city, some of them big enough to drive a truck through. Douma was an opposition stronghold right from the very start of the war. The rebels here managed to survive until last month, and these tunnels would have helped them do so. Damascus says their sophistication proves that rebels are funded by countries like Saudi Arabia, waging a proxy war. Opposition activists say people were driven underground to survive. When we visited Douma in 2012, the uprising against Bashar al-Assad was evolving into a full-on civil war. Opposition activists could only demonstrate under the cover of darkness, already barricading themselves in against government tanks. The siege would begin a year later. Fast forward to today's tunnels and the bright lights of a hospital waiting room connected to them. Rasoon Mahmoud and her sister tell us they survived the siege by eating barley and staying below ground. Because it was dangerous to walk on the streets or even in the house, she says. She's no fan of the rebels, saying they prevented them from leaving even as they were starving. Her 10-year-old son and her sister's baby are stunted, she says, for lack of food. The region was once known as the breadbasket of Damascus, but it's watched as its crops were withered by war and its people dispersed to the four winds. Undulating lines of laundry mark out a refugee camp called Herjila, south of Damascus, sheltering some 16,000 people from East Ghouta, which includes Douma. There is a quiet sense of recovery in the camp, the need to keep still. People have lived through so much, says Hesham Natour. You can't describe it. There was no justice. Natour says he made a mistake not leaving Douma at the start of the war, but he had a home and a business and was reluctant to leave. We kept saying it would be over soon, he says. He and his wife Nadja lost their 1-year-old son, they say, when the rebels refused them permission to travel for medical help. There is no freedom to come and go from this camp without permission, according to aid workers, who say the government is screening, looking for opponents or young men who've avoided military service. And the sense of organized control is another sign of what seems to be an inevitable march to victory for Bashar al-Assad, at least in terms of Syria's civil war. It's not clear when or how many of East Ghouta's displaced will find their way back home. Out of a pre-war population of 400,000, only a quarter remain. As for Douma, it's since been visited by UN chemical weapons inspectors looking into the alleged April attack. But reports that Syrian doctors are being silenced by government intimidation have reinforced fears for some that any evidence that did exist was swept away before the inspectors even arrived in country. The fugue state continues. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Douma.
Margaret and her team on the ground in Douma told a number of stories during their time there, and they captured, as you see, dramatic images that are worth countless words. You can find their work on the National's Instagram page.